Day by day, little by little, we write the story of our lives. Join author Joe Alsh on a walk down memory lane with tenacious humans who didn't let their circumstances dictate their life and what they could become. Welcome to the Lemon Tree Memoirs of Courage podcast.
Hi, Greg. I am so honored to have you as my guest today on the Lemon Tree Memoirs of Courage. I'm so excited to have Greg Williams. He is the author of Shattered by the Darkness. I have read your book 3 times, and I could not put it down each time. So I just want to talk to you about your book. I just want to share, about a month and a half ago, you were on the news on NBC. You were in Dallas promoting your book. I never watch television during the day. I'm too busy working. And I just happened to be home. My housekeeper had NBC on, and there you were talking about your book. So that evening, I emailed you. I found your email, and you agreed to be a guest. And I was so honored. I ordered your book that night. I've ordered it on Kindle, and I've ordered the hard copy too. But I just want to start with, your book is amazing. There are a lot of similarities in our childhoods, and just your emotions on how you handle things, handled in the past, handled today. There's so many similarities when it comes to abuse, just on how to deal with abuse. And I want to start, just tell me why you decided to write the book.
I didn't decide it overnight. I really thought I was writing the book for my benefit, and it was a journal. And I've always journaled all my life, from day one. When I was a young child, I would even about the abuse, I had journals of the abuse in a box, and I had notebook after notebook. And about 3 or 4 years ago, when my physical health just started deteriorating to almost nothing, and my emotional health was going so bad that I decided I'd start writing everything down. And as I started to jot those memories down, it became very clear that, wait, this is a message that maybe my kids need to hear, of understanding why I haven't been the best father, or somebody of my friends need to hear. So I started letting my children read a chapter at a time. And then we decided, wow, this could be something that would help other people. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the motto in the last year or two since the book came out, to try to turn all my negatives into positives. So it didn't start off as a book. It started off as me just pouring everything out in a notebook to get my emotions out, because it was eating me out literally on the inside. And once I did that, then I started to discover there's some similarities with other people that maybe they can get a benefit out of the horrific events that happened to me. Mm-hmm. That's been true. So many people have said, "Oh wow, I felt that emotion. I thought I was crazy. Now that I've read that, no, I'm not. It's just part of the process." So that's kind of how I did that. I just started putting it down on paper, and it eventually became a book. And then I self-published, and then eventually found a publisher that wanted to take it, and kind of turned the rough drawing into a portrait now of what you see in the book.
Mm-hmm. It's a masterpiece. Well, let's start. Tell me briefly about your childhood. Tell me about growing up and what was going on.
Interesting. I was from an upper middle class, predominantly white neighborhood. Lived in the country, about 10 miles outside between 2 larger cities. Talk about larger cities, 5,000, 8,000 people. That's hard to get. Lived on a farm with a couple cows and some, gardens in the back, and 10 acres of yard. And, we played and rode horses and things of that order. So from the outside looking in, you would have thought this was a wonderful place to be. My mom was very successful in a propane gas company. My dad was, president of the City Lions Club and things of that order. They're always well known and thought of highly in the community. But behind those doors, there was some acts that was happening that you couldn't even fathom. And my first line in my book is, I don't remember a day of my childhood that I wasn't sexually abused. And I really don't. The only times I do, when I was at a camp or got to spend the night at the neighbor's house, one of my friends, or something of that order. But even on those days when I was doing that, it would happen before I would go or during the day if he knew that I was going to be gone that night. Um, and it was night after night after night. So that's it in a nutshell. I have two older brothers. One has passed away, 5 years older than me, and I have one that's 10 years older than me that lives in Florida. Um,
How's your relationship with your brother?
Now, uh, we talked about this briefly, and I think one day he was going to tell me something, and something interrupted him, and we never got around to it. We have not talked about the book. We haven't talked about the details and the inside of everything. He knows just basically unless he's read the book, I don't know. Discuss it. And I'm in the back of my mind, I think probably it happened to him too.
I'm so sorry. Tell me about, and I know this abuse was by your father. Tell me about your mother and your relationship growing up with your mother.
Mom was a good mom. She was one of those that made sure my hair was perfectly combed all the time. I had the whitest socks in town. She ironed everything. That type of mother. Um, I witnessed mom and dad having a lot of arguments, and dad slapping her on occasion, and he's being thrown, and they both drunk. But dad was, I would say, on the alcoholic side. Mom was not. She just more socially drank. Mom was never there when I have had people that's read the book and has literally emailed me because I answer every email, every phone call myself personally, and usually within an hour. And one person wrote me from California and said, Greg, do you not understand? Your mom had to know. You can't. And I think that's probably true. Later before my mom died, I discussed it with her. And I told mom it devastated her. She sold the house and moved to Florida immediately. She wanted out of that place. And I promised her that I would never tell all the details because I don't think she needed to hear all the details until she passed. But I told her once she had gone, I was probably going to share this with everybody. That was okay.
And what was her response to that?
She wanted that. I'm aware, but I think sometimes we separate ourselves from what we're dealing with, and you're in that survival mode of I'm just worried about surviving my own life. Motherhood shouldn't have that mode. You ought to be worried about your kids. But I think she poured herself into her job so much. She was ended up when I was about 11 and 12 years old on. She was working 4 to 5 days a week out of the house, out of the city. She was in other states traveling. And that was her to be able to live through what she was enduring. But that was the opening door of the hell that I was getting ready to go through. Because once she left, it was just me and dad in the house. It just intensified to unbelievable degree.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I know for me, my refuge was a little shop in New Orleans called the Lemon Tree. That's the title of my book. And I would go to that little shop, and it smelled so good. It was a little gift shop, which was kind of ahead of its time back in the late 60s, early 70s. But I would go and just take in the clean, the scent, the citrus scent, the smells, just to make me feel love and warmth. And the owner of this little shop befriended me and just let me come in and just sit. And I think back in that time, people had to know something was off, but you didn't have any resource to go to. Like, you know what? I think this little girl that comes into my shop all the time, something's going on in her home life. But it wasn't talked about back then. They didn't know how to handle things. But I know you loved going to your aunt and uncle's house. That was your lemon tree. So tell me about your relationship with your aunt and uncle, and did they have a faith? And tell me about going to your aunt and uncle's.
Yeah, Uncle Ray and Aunt Dorothy was my salvation when it comes to my protection of keeping me somewhat sane during all those times. They were the pillars that I needed. I think that they were that God used to say, we're going to get through this. And Uncle Ray was a deacon in the church. Aunt Dorothy played the piano at church. She kind of taught me how to play the piano, and that was a great refuge for me also. I love when I feel stress, when I feel anxiety coming on me, I literally just sit at the piano and play as long and loud as I can. That's my place of refuge. They were good people. They pretty well, they were the place that they dropped my dad or mom would drop me off in the mornings every day while they went to work, Monday through Friday. And I was there from about 7 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. And then when I started school, I would get on the bus at my house, and I would be dropped off the bus at their house, and then Dad would pick me up after work there. And during that time, they just provided me that safety, that lemon tree effect that you had with them, of peace, of laughter, of going out in the yard and playing wiffle ball, and going out and collecting eggs from the chicken coop, and helping Uncle Ray milk cows, and helping plow the fields, and ride the tractor with him. That was my fun. And when I look back on that was the joy that I had was there. Everything else, when it had Dad involved, always had a turn of abuse, and thus it ruined the happiness of that event or those times. But they were there. They're both gone too now. Their daughter.
Were they ever told about what was going on? Did they ever find out?
No, and I think that would have literally destroyed them. They were just such good Christian, godly people from my mom's side, and they just had hearts of gold. Just that type of person that when you looked at them, you knew they were genuine and authentic, loved unconditionally. Every Saturday morning, I would have, this may not mean anything to us now, but I would have a box of Cracker Jacks with binder twine that he took off the hay bales that he used to do the hay bales, tied to it and hung on my bedroom door handle. Every Saturday morning, Uncle Ray would come into our house, hang a box of Cracker Jacks on it for me, and leave. And it was like, that's the kind of love that they gave all the time.
You know what, Greg, this is why I was meant to interview. I want to tell you, I haven't even put this in my book, but my grandmother, my abusive grandmother, we were at her house every weekend. every single weekend. We were never home on the weekends. We were always with my grandmother. She was very mean, and very abusive, and but made sure we were at the church every time the doors were open. But her next door neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Sancho, when they went to the store every weekend, when they'd go to the grocery, they would bring us a box of Cracker Jacks, my brother and sister and I. Isn't that the craziest thing? I know. And we loved collecting those toys, the little toys in the Cracker Jack box. And in fact, I have about 100. I went to a little antique show, and somebody was selling for like $5 all these old Cracker Jacks toys. And I treasure those things. Yeah, those were great. Anyway, that's so awesome. Well, I know you talked about too music, how important that is to you in your healing. It's the same for me. I don't play the piano, but I sing, and I love to sing. I've involved in my choir, and one song that was so instrumental in my healing was a song that you played at your father's funeral, "No More Night." And for me, I was a church hopper. I didn't trust the church. My grandmother was so horrible, but we had to show up at church, and pretend like everything was perfect. We sat on the first row, or the second row. The pastor would always recognize our family, this model family in the church. My grandmother was a pillar of the church, but she did evil things at home. And so I part of me for years didn't trust the church. I'd go to a church for a couple of years, and then I'd find another church. But I knew that I needed the Lord. I knew that I loved the Lord. I just didn't trust the people. And part of that was I didn't trust that they would accept me, my imperfections. We had to be so perfect at church. It was just a different life. It was very confusing as a child, and then even as an adult. But the song "No More Night," just hearing the words of the song, when we get to heaven, there will be no more suffering, no more pain. But when I heard that song and heard the words of that song, I identified that for myself, that I was allowing myself to continue in this pain from so long ago, and I needed a savior. I needed the Lord to help me through it, and I had to accept and work through some very difficult things that I pushed down for so long and so many years. Tell me about "No More Night" for you. Tell me about the song.
Well, obviously, it has several different meanings. For the Christian, it means, when we go on to heaven, we have no more pain, no more tears, never crying again. That. But when I picked that for my father's funeral, because I gave the message at my dad's funeral, and I sang that song, and for me, it was my anthem of we're burying my darkness. We're burying the very thing that caused me pain, heartache, tears. And now, even at that point, I was naive because I really thought, and this is something that I think every listener needs to hear, just because the pain has stopped or the actual abuse has stopped, that doesn't mean the pain's over. It doesn't mean we're automatically healed or we're going to get better. It means it has the opportunity for that healing to begin in a safer environment. But it doesn't mean, because the years after, I think somehow can even be more devastating than the actual abuse. I could handle physical abuse. I learned how to zone out. But in the book, I start off talking about my father is the darkness. And when I picked that song, "No More Night," obviously that was a symbolism of he's gone. Lights come back into my life. Let's move forward. Even though I used it in the funeral as heaven, and that's where us believers get to experience a place where there isn't night anymore. So I had to know a real special one to me. And I didn't really realize that as much until I started going into each detail of my life. And when I got to the funeral, it's like, wow, I did pick that No More Nights. And I remember having that thought, how appropriate of it. And the words are awesome, awesome meaning.
It's a wonderful song. Now, I know in the book, too, you talk about you struggled with insomnia, and I struggle with insomnia. I still do. And and you have some OCD issues about things, and you get an upset stomach sometimes. And I know I'm the same way. Like when I'm under stress, I know those symptoms coming on. If I'm stressed, my stomach gets upset. And sometimes as a hospice nurse, I did hospice for many years, before I started my own company. But when I was really stressed, I would go and stop at these little gift shops in Dallas that sold candles similar to the Lemon Tree. I would never buy anything because growing up we didn't have any money, but just going in and smelling the scents and, just was allowed me to relax and just calm, So what do you do now? I know you journal, and tell me about, because when you do go through suffering as we have, there is strength in the struggle, and the Lord is using us in wonderful ways. And I talk about the Bible verse, I will redeem the day. And He has. For me, I have a great marriage. I have wonderful children. I've been blessed with a great business. But there's still days that are hard for me. And I know you understand that, but tell me, just how do you deal with, when you have those emotional days and how you handle those?
Yeah, and people, unless you've been there, done that, like you have an experience, you're looking for any type of peace. And I still don't. I sleep about an hour and a half a night. I power nap in a recliner. I'll go to sleep around 1:30 and wake up around 3:15. If I get two of those hour and a halves in a night, I feel really blessed. So I've just learned to not, and I know that's not healthy. I work at a doctor,
Right.
Baylor College. I know that's not healthy, but that's the way I've had to, I've survived. And the funny is that when I feel that anxiety coming on, and I have OCD like crazy, I know exactly how many steps it is from here to the elevator. I know how many steps it is from here to the copy machine. And if somebody will cut me off or interrupt and I have to take a side step, it messes me up. It really have to go, okay, it's okay. It's only half. It's really have to process. And I think being aware of it has caused me ability to adjust a little bit more. But the one thing that I've really, and people are going to think I'm even crazier than what I am, the Andy Griffith Show. I watched that as a kid. Every time it was on, I put myself, because Andy and my dad looked similar, but it was a complete different type of father. And I found joy in that. It was like, I want to be that child, that father. So I watched it all the time as a child. Now, I watch 3 to 6 episodes a night. Around 10 o'clock at night, I'll kick it on and just let him go from one to the next to the next. And that brings me somehow, it takes that anxiety down to, here I am a preacher. I wish I could say, reading God's word 6 hours a day will do it. For me, that internal switch is that show. And I have no other really cause that brings me peace, except I remember as a child wanting to be in a family with a father that had that kind of love for his child and kind of safety and protection to do. And So that's my safety net. Besides, obviously, Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior,
Mm-hmm.
and Bible and church now and things of that order. But that's kind of my secret uh, place that I go to if I need to really simmer down. I feel it coming on. That's my safety.
That's awesome. Well, and I know, my goal in my book, and I think for you, for your book as well, is it needs to be an open conversation. There is healing.
Yeah.
You can move past that and have a wonderful life, and you can't let that pain define you. So what can you say to someone that has read your book, that has a similar upbringing and just hasn't been able to come to terms with it? I know for me, I could not even talk about this until my grandmother actually passed away. It was at her funeral, after her funeral. And her funeral, as somebody made a comment, that was the driest funeral I've ever been to. Nobody cried, not one person cried. And it was then that I felt like, oh, I can talk about it now. She had such a hold on me. I was terrified of my grandmother. I was terrified. But what can you say to someone that has gone through abuse and struggling and knows, you know what? There's got to be a better place. What are the steps?
Yeah.
What can they start doing? Journaling, I know, is a great answer, but give some examples of where they can move forward.
Yeah, I think I have three steps that's worked for me, and I explain it in the workshops that I do around the country. One is I name it. I think it's important to when I finally, and I was in front of a crowd speaking when I actually let the world know I was ever abused. I was a pastor of a
Wow.
church. I was a pastor of a church in Missouri, and I was preaching, and I was really, how we Baptists get going, and I was just slinging, and I just let it slip, and I was sexually abused, and when I did that, it went across the crowd with, and I stopped and thought, what have I just done? And then I continued on. Afterwards, three people came up to me afterwards, crying, and said, Greg, me too. It's happened to me. How do you deal with it? And immediately the Holy Spirit in my mind prompted me of remember this day because I'm going to use you in such a way that people are going to be lined up to tell you the problems. And
Wow.
I time after time talking to them and expressing, just let them let it out. But until I named it, I kept it all hidden. So that naming is important. I think it's important to just say, I have been sexually abused. I am a victim. It's not my fault. I had nothing
Mm-mm.
to do. There's no error on my behalf of that, but I'm a victim. And I think that's important just to name it. And
Mm-hmm.
then in that, I also claimed it, that I started to find out everything I could about that. There's not that many great resources out there, but there's a few that I would highly recommend to get to help through that process. But so I started finding out everything. I started journaling everything. I put everything down. I started writing my feelings, my emotions, what happened, even trying to put specific dates and events. And then after that, I started the healing process when I started sharing it with other people. And I honestly think that we're not destined to this world to just experience pain, that God can take all the evil that the devil has cast upon us and turn it into a place of where I can help other people. So it's hard to say I thank God for my abuse because I don't even think God thanks God for the abuse.
Mm-mm.
But I can say thank you that I've gone through it because now I have been on a journey that I can grab other people's hands and say, let's walk this journey together. And that's what I love about this, Joe, when I get to talk to somebody that's on a similar vein. Wouldn't it be awesome if we had some kind of network that you could take somebody down that journey together with them, and then you could hand that hand off to me when you got to the point of where they needed something else, another way of looking at something, and then I could hand somebody off to you, and we could just hand people back and forth to people that's along that journey to be able to get down this path that a lot more have been down than we want to admit as
I know.
this 1 in 4 and 2 and 1 in 6. Uh, every 1 in 6 boys have been abused. That's not even close.
No.
1 in 4 girls, not even close. I start every one of my workshops with, if there's somebody here that doesn't know somebody close in their family or in their friend circle of friends that hasn't been abused, stand up. And nobody has ever stood up and said, I don't know anything about this. It's always 100%. So far, I may be proved wrong one day, but so far, everybody knows of somebody. And the sad thing is, those statistics prove and have been found out to be true that 85% to 90% that have been abused never tell anybody.
Well,
Never.
it's so shameful. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. And there's shame involved. And, even for my brother and sister reading my book, it has been very difficult for them to read my book. They know stuff what was going on and they experienced some things, and it's difficult. It is difficult to talk about. Well, we're going to end with this. I encourage everyone listening to read Greg's book. It's amazing. It helped me. And I am still working through this stuff. I'm still a work in progress. So, but tell me, just share. I know you're talking, you told me in the late summer about talking with teachers about what signs to look for. Looking back, what are some signs that teachers or your Sunday school teacher or your librarian at school, what are some things people might see that they think, something's just not quite right here? What are some signs that you tell people to look for?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I don't know, Joe, about you, but I went through 4 years old all the way through college and never had one teacher ask me if I was okay.
Wow.
So either I was manipulating and playing that I was fine, or I was just one of those that was overlooked. There's signs that some red flag, I think, in children that we need to be really aware of. One, I would think, would automatically be an abrupt change in behavior. If they've always been happy, lucky, and then all of a sudden something's changed. They're quiet, they're reserved, they're angry, they have outbursts, something of that order, and it's out of the norm. I would automatically start going, okay, I'm not going to call anybody. I just want to keep my eye on and see if there's anything else. I think for little children, that flight or fright mode of if they are, when something gets tense, they immediately run away and they're in the corner in a child position, trying to stay away from them, and they want to stand behind and never come out front, or they freeze up and they have no reaction at all. I think that flight and fright is another sign. If you have a child, and obviously I think every pediatrician will tell you this, if bedwetting wasn't an issue and it is now, I think that's that needs to be aware. I was doing a presentation with the Texas teachers not too long ago, up in San Antonio, I believe. And I had one teacher said, and I think this is a 4-year-old, a 3 or 4-year-old, said, just the other day I was taking this child to the bathroom and they were still to the point where they had to wipe the child's bottom. And they said all of a sudden he screamed. Is that something I should have been concerned about? I said, absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Things are major. I mean, I literally have physical scars all over my body uh, from the abuse. Those types of things uh, we need to be aware of. So if we obviously see signs of that, I think other ones, I would think a change in eating pattern, uh, a downturn of grades, if they're, in school, especially high school. If you see them, they were always B's, B average, and all of a sudden they're bringing home D's. Something going, and we need to get them off this crazy thing. Uh, Parents need to watch this. If they're secluded now, it's hard to tell now from a normal child, teenager, from a teenager that's been abused because everybody's doing this.
I
But become
know.
very aware that if they're sharing things, as long as this is in my house and one of my children are using it, at any time I have the right to pick it up and look at it. This is only just for the kids. We need to be aware of that. And in those discussions with, well, who are you talking to? Let me see your last text and be on top of that. Just open our eyes to our environment. I think hurriedness in parenthood has been one of the biggest detriments of raising our children. We are so busy, so afraid that our own lives aren't going to be successful, that we let the TV, the internet, cell phones, video games raise our kids. And in the middle of all that, we've missed a lot of signs that are really visible. They're right there in front of us. We just ignore them.
Well, it's been such an honor to have you as my guest. I'm so excited about your book. Go out and buy it. You do have a hotline you talked about, and you've got a website. Can you share those with us?
Yeah, the website is shatteredbythedarkness.com. We're upgrading that, so it's going to have a lot more resources on it. But we have that on there. The hotline that is 24/7, you can call me. And it's not really a hotline like if you're in a crisis, there's crisis hotlines you need to
Right.
call. You're in danger. That's a whole different ballgame. This is a line that anybody in the world can call any time of the day. I've heard from New Zealand and Australia, France, I mean, all around the world. And it's hard to talk to some people because you can't hardly even understand them. But if they, okay. And, but it's 713-332-2400. And I'm the only one. I pick up every call and will
Wow.
let them tell the story. And in that story, I don't find out their name. I don't keep track of their numbers. I offer my email and my personal number if they want to talk again. I try to, while I'm listening to them, look up on the internet of local sites in the countries or the states that they're in, that if they need to reach out for an emergency situation, this is who to talk to. And I encourage them just to tell the story. What do you want to? What do you have on your mind right now that you want to share? And I didn't know I was opening up that kind of can of worms. I thought my stories were horrific. It's amazing what people are going through, and they have no one to talk to. So I wanted to at least make myself available. You can always tell your story to me, and I'll try to point you in the right direction. I don't try to choke Jesus down their throat. I don't refer to the Bible unless they want to go there. Uh, I'm just there to listen and then try to give them a tip or two to help them get through the day. And most of the people that call me is always in the middle of the night, their night, whatever time frame, what time
Right.
zone they're in. But that's the number 713-332-2400, and
Thank
I will answer the.
That's awesome. Greg, thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed day. Keep selling books and helping those. And just God is so good. And thank you again for your time. Appreciate it so much.
And when I get my podcast up and running, I'll have you on, and
I would
I'll let
love
you.
it. I'd love
Thank
it.
you, dear.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us on the Lemon Tree Memoirs of Courage podcast, hosted by author Joe Alsh. You can find more information on Joe's beginnings and the Lemon Tree at thelemontreebook.com.